Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang semuanya. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this webinar or this event. Thank you also to our partner Enago, Arya and Preds for facilitating this event. I think our unit in our university, LEPJBHKI, is continuously committed to organizing activities that related to capacity building. I think in terms of scientific publication, especially at international level. Thank you also to the speaker, Tony. How are you? Nice to meet you.
Morning, very well.
Uh,
Good afternoon.
Okay, I hope this activity can provide full benefit and impact to the participant in this event. I also invite our colleagues for outside of the Airlangga University. At least we can get the knowledge of how to choose a good journal and have a great chance to be accepted. Of course, there are many things I think that become indicators of the acceptance of our papers in journal. So today, I think is we will talk about how to avoid rejection due to language errors. Although our native language in Indonesia is not English, but I think it's also important that we need to be our concern also. Currently, I think here there are many software tools that can be used to help improve our writing language, but however, I think we still need the role of expert in this matter, of course. So I would like also how we can receive this information from Tony that we can improve our draft of paper, then especially in a language of English, and then we can submit to the good of journal. Okay, I think that's all that I can say at this time. So once again, thank you very much for everyone and welcome to this webinar. Enjoy it. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Harry, for those wonderful statements and setting the context right. Well, I do agree with the fact that while there are so many solutions out there, human intervention can never be neglected in terms of the value add. Well, before giving the stage to the speaker of today's session, Mr. Tony, I would like to reinstate about the partnership between Universitas Airlangga and Inago. Give me a moment. I would love to share my screen for a while. Okay. Team, can you please give the rights to share my screen? Yes. So here we go. It won't take much. I just wanted to share, be thankful for Universitas Airlangga to give this opportunity. This particular session has been a part of the initiatives that we take in order to support the capacity in Universitas Indonesia, as I had already stated. So Inago has been a trustworthy partner of Universitas Airlangga from quite some time. It's been more than 5 years. Just a few things about Inago. Inago was formed in 2005, and since 2005, we have been supporting worldwide academicians in getting published in international journals. Through this particular service of ours, we also work with individual researchers as well as universities, world-renowned publishers, corporates in edtech industry as well. Several partnerships that we have, not only universities, but also academic organizations, for example, the public ethics. Through this particular partnerships, what we more the partners have grown internationally. This is a snapshot of a few of our partners. Many of our partners trust Inago services like Elsevier, IEEE, Oxford University Press. Not only the publishers, but also certain organizations, those who are not directly conducting research. For example, QS. They value what we bring on the table is the experience of working with the publishers as well as working with the individual researchers. So here what we are doing is we are understanding the challenges faced by the academics, or at the same time, we understand what are the expectations of these world-renowned publishers from the researcher community. And then hence we are trying to bridge that particular gap of understanding through our services. So under the collaboration between Universitas Airlangga and Inago, we provide 3 levels of editing. First is the language check service. Then middle level service is copy editing, where 2 editors work on the manuscript and also format the paper according to journal's expectation. And finally, the substantive editing, which is most sought out or premium service of Inago, where the level of intervention by the subject matter expert is highest. Moreover, Edit Unlimited feature also allows you to get your paper rechecked before submitting it to the journal. Let's say you have gotten it edited from Inago services and you have submitted the paper to the journal, and journal is sharing certain comments with minor revision or major corrections. With these corrections made by the author, you can again send it to Inago under the Edit Unlimited support. So here, what you're doing is you are getting coverage for 365 days. Throughout your publication journey, Inago will walk you through along with you to get you published. Now, this is the unique platform under where Universitas Airlangga prices are configured under the special approvals, of course, under the special discounts, of course. For this, in order to utilize Inago services, you can reach out to the SPOC, that is adm@pppi.onair.ac.id. So you must be familiar about this organization, which is supporting research initiatives at Universitas Airlangga. So that's all from my end. Prior to handing over to Tony, I'd like to share a simple statement about Inago services, how you can make the best out of the support.
Do you have a research paper? Want to publish it in an international journal and be famous? But are you worried about journal rejection? Don't be. Inago's author services are designed to make your paper publication ready. Our mission is author first, quality first. Nothing else matters more to us. We offer 2 levels of editing to address all academic writing and publishing needs of researchers. Our copy editing service makes your paper meet all journal requirements for grammar, formatting, technical. Papers submitted to this service are returned free from all such errors. But if you want a lot more than this, our substantive editing service is exactly what you need. Wondering what more does it offer? It improves the logical flow and structure of your paper. It enhances the content to fix any gaps that may exist in the paper. You also get Rejection Shield, which means we edit your paper even after you receive your journal's feedback. We edit responses to reviewer queries, write a cover letter, and edit content added by you. In short, we offer you complete peace of mind. No matter what service you choose, remember the Inago promise. We promise you that your manuscript will never be rejected because of language. Need more? Wait, we've just gotten started. You need re-editing? No problem. Our Edit Unlimited support offers free editing unlimited number of times until you're satisfied. You have questions for our editors? Bring them on. We won't charge you a penny. You need a cover letter too? Why not? We'll make one that will make your research shine. You need a certificate as proof of editing. You'll have it in your inbox. The result of all of this, publication success.
So publication success is what we'd like our authors to achieve. With this short note, I would hand over the stage to Tony, our VP. He'll be sharing insights with his experience of STM industry. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Neha. Hi, everyone. I'm Tony O'Rourke, and as Neha says, I'm the Vice President here at Inago. Can we open these slides, please? Thank you. Get on to, yeah. So this presentation will be as interactive as possible. Please send your questions in the chat box below. There will also be several polls that will take place during the presentation. So if you, we would encourage you to participate in those as well. And the session is being recorded so that you can refer to the session, or in fact, allow your colleagues that may not be able to attend today to benefit from this session. A few words about me. I've been in academic publishing for over 30 years. I've worked for scientific and healthcare publishers in a variety of roles. Over the last 7 years, I've been working very closely with publishers, specifically, as well as with universities here in Europe, to help publishers, to help authors to improve the quality of their submissions to their journals. As we're going to go through, language is a very important part of the submission. The language has to be correct. It's not the most important part. As you'll see, there are other factors that come up, but language always comes up. And I can assure you from my own personal experience, I have seen papers rejected, not because they are bad papers, but because the work required by the publisher to bring the standard of English to the right level can be considered too high. So it's really, this session is really about allowing you to help yourself to make sure that language does not be one of the issues which comes into consideration when reviewing your paper. So here at Enago, my responsibility, as I say, is mostly working with publishers and universities here in Europe and to a certain extent in the US. I've also been involved in launching various AI products, AI-based products and services to support scientific writing. And in my career, I've served on various trade associations and councils in order to further and support standards within academic publishing. Next slide, please. So today's session is going to focus specifically on language and what you can do to help yourself to ensure that language isn't a reason why your paper, your submission, which you spent weeks or months preparing, might be rejected. At the impact of language errors in academic publishing, we're going to look at some of the common mistakes that non-native English language authors may make when preparing their submission and what you can do to avoid them. We'll be sharing a few strategies in order to help you to enhance your language skills, the importance of high-level academic editing by professionals, just indicate why our services support that goal as much as possible. And if there's time at the end, if we have an hour, there will be a time for questions as well. But I do encourage you to ask questions throughout the session, and my colleagues in the background will be sharing those questions with me. Next slide, please. So, first poll. I'd like you to select one of the 5 or 6, I should say, answer this question. What measures, first of all, do you take to avoid journal desk rejection? And when I say desk rejection, I mean not the rejection by the reviewer, but the rejection by the publisher's own editorial staff who assess papers before they even go to a reviewer. So what do you do to ensure that your paper isn't being rejected? Please select one of the 6 categories. Do you follow journal submissions guidelines? Do you proofread and edit yourself? You can choose multiple, by the way. You don't choose just one. You can take expert advice and proofread and edit. Do you check for plagiarism? Do you do a pre-submission peer review to test paper? Or is there something else that you might do? Please select from those polls and we'll share the results later. I'll give you seconds. Okay, next slide, please. Here we are. So we have the results back so far. Thank you for those of you who have voted. 12 out of 15 of you have suggested that following submission guidelines is the first thing. Absolutely right. You know, make sure you do what the journal requests. An increasing number of journals are trying to be as open as possible in terms of their submission guidelines and not putting restrictions, but you'll still see those restrictions will exist. 7 out of 15 of you proofread and edit yourself. Okay. 27% takes expert advice to proofread and edit. You check for plagiarism. 8 out of 53%, and 4 out of 15 do some form of pre-submission peer review. So that's interesting. So quite a mixed view. All of those are correct. All of those are activities that you should be doing. Next one. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's look at the impact of language errors and the consequences of poor language quality. You can spend weeks and months preparing your paper, but if the paper is badly written, as I say, that can increase the chance of the chance for rejection. Poor language not only increases the chance of rejection, but it can reduce the visibility, the readability, and the impact of your research. If the research isn't well written and clear, it may not be easy for your reviewer to make the right decision, and also it may not be easy for the reader to best understand what it is, what the ideas you're trying to put across. Poor language quality can also impact on citation performance and the bibliometrics like impact factor and H factor, because authors tend not to read badly written papers. So I beg your pardon, researchers tend not to read badly written papers. And of course, you know, if you're submitting regularly submitting badly written papers, that can potentially, not always, but potentially have an impact on your reputation. So there are issues that you need to bear in mind when reviewing the language quality on your paper. Next slide, please. So if we look at the primary reasons why papers are rejected, you'll see this is an example from a paper that was published in a medical journal several years ago, around the reasons why the editors gave for rejection. This looked at 400 papers from a journal called the Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology in India, and revealed that 15% of the rejections made by the journal, by desk editors often in this case, was due to poor language. As I said before, it's not the most important factor, but it certainly is one of the main factors for rejection. You know, other factors such as methodology, poor scientific content, similarity, i.e. over-plagiarized papers, can be seen as just as often more important. But this is one thing that you can do to help yourself. If you make sure that the language is good within your paper, then language doesn't come into consideration when it comes to. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is another example from a piece of research that was conducted in 2021, which again looked at the reasons why rejected. And you see here again, language isn't the number one factor, but certainly is one of the top 2 or 3. So it's important. You need to make sure the language is as good as possible when you submit your next paper. So another slide, another poll for you. How important do you think it is to improve your language skills as part of your professional development? Please select one of the following 4. I'll give you a few seconds. So do we have a result that we can share? So this is the importance of language skills as part of your professional development, and the results are, I'll be surprised if anyone says not extremely important. 4 of you think it's moderately important. It's important. It's very, very important. It's something that you have to make sure happens. You know, it's a barrier for authors whose first language is not English. So you need to make sure that you've overcome that barrier. And I can tell you the number of papers I've seen that get rejected just because they are badly written. So please, please, please help yourself to remove that barrier. Next slide, please. So let's look at the impact that good writing skills have on a paper. What does it do? Well, of course, it helps you to communicate your research effectively. As we've said several times already during this presentation, it reduces the risk of rejection before and during peer review. As I say, there are 2 stages very often with a journal submission. The desk editor will evaluate quickly the quality of the paper before it's sent for review. Reviewer time is precious. So what a publisher will often do is screen out content that has no chance of succeeding. So you need to make sure that your paper gets through that first barrier. Good writing can present complex data and a degree of analysis that is otherwise difficult to communicate verbally. I think that goes without saying that good, clear communication helps you to present your ideas in a clear and unambiguous way. And of course, it can help you in securing grants, sharing new ideas, facilitating academic promotion, and influencing your community, your research and scientific community, your global audience working in your subject area. Let's look now at some of the common language and grammar mistakes made by ESL researchers, authors whose first language isn't English, and some of the tips on how to avoid them. So errors made by non-English language authors generally fall into 6 main categories. And these are the 6 main categories. Number 1, and these aren't in any order, by the way, but firstly, subject-verb disagreements, the incorrect use of articles, the wrong use of tense in a verb, incorrect use of prepositions, punctuation errors, and writing style errors. Let's look first of all at subject-verb agreement or subject-verb disagreement, as is often the case. Now, but before I start, I can suggest, if you ever need any information to support your writing, please go to the Inago Academy. And there's an entire section within the Inago Academy, inago.com/academy, that talks specifically just about making subjects and verbs agree. So please, I would urge you to refer to that site. A subject denotes the person or thing that acts, whereas a verb denotes the existence, action, or occurrence. You need to make sure the two line up. The first rule is to make your subjects and verbs agree, and that the subject matches the verb. In general, if the subject is plural, the verb must be plural. Regular verbs written in the present tense, when converted to plural, often omit the S at the end of the verb. The trick is to make your subject and verb agree with each other, and to identify the quantity of your subject and match the verb to it. So unifying the sentence makes it easier. Make sure that the quantity of the subject is identified. After subject identification, match that verb to it. And incorrect subject-verb agreement will lead to confusion in your readers. Let me share a couple of examples. So here's a few examples of incorrect and correct subject-verb agreements. So in the case of indefinite pronouns such as anyone, everybody, anyone, nobody, no one, someone, they always take the singular, and they need to be accompanied by singular verbs. So for example, when you say everyone changed their mind, assuming that everyone is plural, it's not. Everyone changes their mind, because that indefinite pronoun, everyone, is treated as a singular verb. All of the air around us are polluted. All is not plural. All is always taken as a singular. So all of the air around us is polluted. And not all collective pronouns, however, are treated as singular. This is the great thing about English. Rules can sometimes be broken. The crowd, the incorrect example given here, the crowd cheer on. The crowd, in this particular case, has to be treated as a singular noun. Thousands of voters lines up outside of polling. Thousands is not taken as a plural, but as a singular verb. So the thousands of voters line up outside the polling booth. Next slide, please. With a few more examples. So again, nouns that denote amounts of time, money, and distance are treated as singular. 12 hours are not a long time to wait is incorrect. 12 hours is a long time to wait is correct. $8,000 were too high a price. Incorrect. Always use the money noun as a singular. Fractions again can be treated as singular and plural. 50%, about 1/3 is treated as a singular noun. Either again is treated as singular. So always make sure that you use a singular tense as opposed to the plural. Next slide, please. And again, I realize this is perhaps common sense, but I will remind it, always make sure that the articles and the subject verb agree. And that you're also using articles in the correct way. And this is something I see quite a lot from ESL authors is the inconsistent use of articles such as a and the. Citric acid was used as solvent can be incorrect, but the correct method would be to insert an indefinite pronoun in there. Same would go for both film labels were weighed separately using analytical balance. Both film labels were weighed separately using an analytical balance is the correct. The article exists in the correct place within the sentence. The same is true with singular and plural. Data from the model, AMT, is interpreted. Data is a plural, so data are interpreted. We first outline the overall architecture, then describe the components in detail. Ensure that you have the right linking word in place. We first outline the overall architecture and then describe the components in detail. Next slide, please. Again, this is a very common mistake from ESL authors is their use of the incorrect use of the definite article. The definite article should be used when we refer to any specific object and used while referring to proper nouns or any specific context. So examples we give here is, I think they're self-explanatory. Ensure the use of a definite pronoun when describing a specific object, such as the United Nations, or when you're describing an object as part of the sentence. Bring the test tube from the table. And also indefinite articles a and an are used when the noun is being described, which is one of many items. So the research is a major step forward in medical science. The Human Genome Project is an exciting development towards personalized medicine. So if there are multiple nouns being described, ensure you use the indefinite pronoun. And again, please refer to the inago.com, the Inago Academy, for an article that specifically talks about article use in academic writing. Share that link, the links at the end of this sentence, and the links will be available separately. Further rules for correct article usage. When nouns are used in generic reference, they can be used in plural form without the definite article. So you can say, for example, instead of the colonies were isolated from the table, colonies were isolated from the plate, because it's a generic reference rather than a specific. Bring the test tube from the table is the correct way of expressing that generic reference within the sentence. And mass nouns that cannot be counted often have indefinite articles associated with them. So wisdom is not a product of schooling, rather than the incorrect example given. The Human Genome Project was an exciting development towards personalized medicine. And the introduction section is generally written in the present tense. The perfect present tense is used to indicate an action that occurred, excuse me, an action that occurred at a non-specific time in the past, but also has relevance in the present. The present perfect is also sometimes used to introduce background information in a paragraph. After the first sentence, the tense shifts to the simple past. So we give some examples here of where the tense goes in the manuscript itself. The future tense is, though, used to describe an action that will take place at a particular point in the future. And mostly any future studies can be conducted from the present study. So this paper analyzes the effect of high temperatures on certain bacterial species rather than using the incorrect past tense. The methods section is usually written in the simple past tense. Statistical analyses were used to determine the relationships between variables. And the discussion and conclusion sections are usually written both in past and present tense, depending on the context. So in this particular example, we're presenting some data in a table. So table 1 presents the structural unit. It's like this. Carry on. We have a question from one of the speakers asking, in academic writing, how can a researcher effectively paraphrase information from a source to avoid plagiarism while still maintaining the original meaning and contributing to their own analysis? What are the key indicators that might suggest paraphrasing has crossed the line into plagiarism? That's a really, really good question. You know, you need to use sources to be able to justify and to support your theories, but at the same time, you do not want to be able to be seen to be copying, which is effectively what plagiarism is. What publishers do is they will have a score. They will say, okay, I will allow plagiarism up to a certain point, you know, and that score can be a score using one of the plagiarism tools such as Authenticate or FlagScan or one of these tools, where they might say a limit, say, look, oh, I will allow 5%, 10%, 2% to be copied or brought across directly from a second source. But the first practical thing I would do is to use a tool such as Authenticate or FlagScan to check your paper and see how it scores. You may not realize your paper is plagiarizing to that extent, but do practically try and use one of those tools if it's available to you to see what the publisher will then eventually also see. It is difficult because, you know, a well-written paper may contain a phrase that you want to use, but try to adapt that phrase into your own clear and concise way. But as I say, there's no single one indicator, because these sources such as FlagScan, Authenticate will look at millions of resources to determine whether that content has been directly copied or not. So let's go back to the examples. Which tense goes where in the manuscript? So here we give a couple of examples of the present perfect tense being used in the background to the context. So numerous researchers have used this method, is the correct way of expressing that sentence. The future tense is used to describe the possibilities of future studies that can be conducted. We or future studies will or can analyze the colonies to determine the strains. Very welcome, Nathaniel. Okay, let's look at the next slide, which is looking at the correct verb and just summarizing the correct verb with correct tenses. So we've said verb tenses inform the readers when a certain event or action takes place. Make sure you're using the correct tense situation you're describing. Past tense is used for reporting the findings of the study. This study found. Perfect present tense is used to describe an ongoing research or general opinion. Present tense is used to give an overview of the topic and stating the main points of the study. Again, if you refer to the Inago Academy, there are plenty of resources in there that talks about term usage, tense usage in academic writing, and I would urge you to use that. So let's look now at prepositions, using prepositions correctly. And this is something we see a lot. I mean, this is something actually, if I'm honest, English language first authors also make the same mistakes. It's not just if your first language isn't English. You see this a lot, the use of prepositions. And here are some examples of things like in and into. The samples are placed into the tubes is incorrect if the samples are placed in the tubes. On and onto, I placed this is about position of movements. I placed a petri dish onto the table. Incorrect sentences such using of and for. Of and for are interesting. I mean, again, this is probably something you see just as much with native English authors as you would with ESL authors. Of indicates Yeah, so of indicates a reference. This is a picture of my last birthday to specify an amount. Of specifies an amount. For is used to indicate the reason of. It's, I am really happy for you. So of is around the specifying an amount. For is to be given as a reason. So this technique allows the controlled synthesis of nanoscale carbon-shaped rods. The geochemical data shows the TOC results for the Cinembo formation. Of is the amount, for is the reason. So try and ensure that those simple errors are avoided. Again, with punctuation rules, the proper use of commas, so important. Make sure that a comma is used in the right way. A comma is used, and colons is something you often find, again, not just with ESL authors, common mistakes. A colon is used in sentences to show that something is following, like a quotation, an example, or a list. Semicolons are used to join two independent thoughts or sentences or clauses together that could stand alone as a single complete sentence. So we give examples here of two cases where a colon is appropriate and a semicolon is appropriate. Rock formation in the area is dominated by volcanic rock sediments. Semicolon, young and old rocks are present in the volcanic data. Rather than presenting that as a single sentence, they're two specific ideas or unique, independent ideas. Single, complete sentence. Next slide, please. Now, again, always check the journal required writing style. What you find increasingly is that most international journals will accept both, but you will find some that will specify either US English or UK British English. It's always checking what that preferred style is. So, for example, again, this is a bit of a general rule, but UK British English journals will prefer, for example, that contractions such as won't, don't, can't are not used. And that the uncontracted version will not, do not, cannot is preferred. So always check this style that's required. Again, a similar mistake that's often made is incorrect use of capitalization or spacing in a sentence. And again, the style guide will often specify what is required for the journal. Next slide, please. So, doorbell going in the background. So, a few more examples of incorrect contractions is that the try not to use those lazy words, can't, shan't, and be aware of potential typographical errors within the paper in terms of, the use of a name rather than the nationality. We have another question. Okay, there's a question which my colleague Neha is answering about the what does Inago do? I'll let Neha answer that perhaps towards the end of the session. Okay, so let's look now at strategies that you can use to improve your language skills. And there are a number of simple tips and tricks that you can use. First thing I'd like to do is ask you to respond to this poll. What measures do you take to ensure language correctness in your professional writing, and select all of them that apply? So please select one or more of those choices. And again, I'll give you a few seconds to respond to that while I clear my throat. So, proofread it multiple times, use an AI writing assistant, attending language courses, webinars, or workshops, read extensively to improve vocabulary, use professional editing services, or something else. You may have something else that you know that you've used that can help you to improve your language. So, do we have the results of the poll? Again, they're all correct. They're all good resources. And it's interesting to see which ones are preferred. Using AI writing assistants like Trinker AI or ChatGPT or various other online resources is proving to be the most popular so far. Proofread multiple times. Personally, I would say that should be number one. You know what you need to do to ensure that your submission is as good as it can be. Attending language courses, of course, 40%, that's important. I cannot understate the importance of reading extensively to improve vocabulary. You know, if you're unsure about a word or if there's a new word, you know, find out how the correct use for that term. Using professional editing services, thank you to those of you who think that's important. I mean, we know that not every single paper goes through a professional editing services, but what we do know is that papers that use a professional editing service tends to have a higher chance of success. Doesn't guarantee success, because it certainly does increase the chance or the probability of success. So yes, quite an interesting mixed view in terms of the what you do to ensure language correctness. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are tips that you can use that we would recommend to avoid language errors. As we've said already, reading English language material, books, journals, science magazines, preprints, anything at all will support and improve your vocabulary. Familiarize yourself with unknown words using dictionaries and thesauri. Encourage yourself to learn a new word every day. And, you know, I do the same, and I'm a native English speaker, and keep a notebook for new terminologies or technical words. Understand the origin of a word. Well, which is quite advanced, but will help you to understand its use, and referring to things like etymology, dictionaries, or resources. Practice, and then more practice, and then even more practice is such an important requirement. Actively use new vocabulary in conversations and related articles, and practice and practice and practice the use of that. And, you know, increasing, particularly over the last few years, the use of AI writing assistants to scan your written work for grammatical errors. And we have our own tool, but there are a number of other tools also available in the marketplace. But we have a tool which we developed, first of all, for our own use internally, but now we have been offering to researchers and to universities and to publishers around the world. Slide, please. So, I cannot stress the importance of preciseness, precision, even. It's not preciseness, isn't it? You're making your scientific writing precise. Add precision to your scientific writing by supplementing numbers to words, such as increased or decreased. That is such an important thing. If you can be precise in your writing, try and avoid vague terms such as increase in your paper, in your content. You can almost guarantee if you use those terms, that will be pushed back, in that reviewers will want to see evidence. Specificity such as this helps establish a baseline for what is normal. It allows the reader to interpret the meaningfulness of the changes being presented. So, for example, a phrase such as a decrease in circulating cortisol levels is meaningless if a reader doesn't know what is expected as normal or what the value was before experimentation or intervention. Next slide, please. This is around placing pertinent information accurately. If the reader wants to know more about what the subject is showing, or the author is showing in his or her study, then the reader can access those specific points by obtaining the paper directly, of course. Avoid using lengthy citations and fillers before summarizing and presenting findings of research study. Focus on the key aspects, you know, so you don't need to introduce a paper with the complete citation or the complete date or location of the author. You can simply show what you're referring to in the reference. Smith et al. Brackets 2009 showed that. Begin the sentence with the principal finding by stressing on the key points first. Place the most important information on the stress position within a sentence. So it's incorrect to say in individuals with compromised immune systems, natural killer cells exhibited twofold increase due to. It's English, it's reasonable English, but the correct way of writing that would be a twofold decrease in the number of natural killer cells was observed in, is the correct way, because you're placing the stress on the you're placing the emphasis on the stress position. Slide, please. And now we'll talk about choosing appropriate words such as therefore and thereby. And again, this is something you see even native English language speakers making the same mistake. So it's not just authors whose first language is English. Therefore and thereby. Therefore indicates a conditional action in simple terms for that reason, whereas thereby presents a process, or in simple terms, as a result of that. I will say personally, as an English speaker, thereby is being increasingly phased out of English, but it's not incorrect to use it. But you do see it less and less. It's seen as quite old English, but it's still correct. So therefore is a conditional action. For that reason, thereby is a process which indicates as a result of that. You do see it used less and less these days. Slide, please. Another thing that you often see where you see mistakes being made is around the selection of the word between versus among. Between must be used when exactly two elements are involved, whereas among should be used when more than two elements are involved. So, for example, deliberations have been initiated between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed researchers is incorrect. You should be inserting among there instead of between, because there are more than two elements involved. If it were just two elements, then between would be correct. Between is only two elements, exactly two elements. And you often see mistakes being used or error occurring because of the use of may versus might. May denotes permission, whereas might denotes possibility. So these findings may have implications for medical practitioners is incorrect, because it's not denoting a permission, it's denoting a possibility. So therefore, these findings might have implications for medical practitioners. Next slide, please. Also, again, mistakes you see not just from ESL authors, but this is very common, is the use of numbers and the inappropriate placement of numbers in a sentence. Try and avoid starting a sentence with a numeral. Try spelling out the numbers or rephrasing the sentence if you can. So, for example, it's stylistically preferred to say 100 by spelling out 100 samples was collected from the swamp, by spelling out that number to start with. Consistency in your formatting choices is a way to demonstrate your attention to detail. If you're going to use spelled out numbers, make sure you continue to use spelled out numbers throughout your paper. But importantly, always consult your journal target style guide to see what they prefer. Some journals might prefer you to actually write out numbers rather than the words. Okay. Anthropomorphism in scientific writing, that's about attributing human-like characteristics such as feelings and behaviors to non-human entities. It can be confusing and can mislead communication by trying to associate a human-like characteristics with a non-human object. So, for example, it's incorrect to say the study found that bacterial growth accelerated in the media containing glucose, because the study can't find anything. It's the researchers or the investigators that find or draw conclusions. Therefore, it's correct to say the study revealed rather than the researchers found. The study explored the effects of heat and pressure on. The study didn't do anything. It was the researchers that found effects of heat and pressure. Therefore, in this study, researchers explored the effects of heat and pressure. Or try not to associate human-like characteristics with non-human entities. slide, please. So over the last few slides, I just want to look at the importance that's associated, the importance of using top impact or high impact academic editing by professional editors. Why is professional editing important? Well, it does a number of things. It allows for gaps to be identified in the manuscript, and you can do that effectively with the correct subject matter expertise. When you, for example, when you're using an Inago service, you know, if you're writing in a particular paper, what we do is to map your subject discipline with the subject discipline of the editor. So he or she will have the same background, perhaps at a higher level, as you, and will understand the context and the syntax that's required and be able to identify potential gaps, possible references, for example. It establishes a coherent structure in the manuscript. One of the things we will do is to ensure there's a good flow and consistency throughout the manuscript, and that the manuscript has a clear structure. Ensure that there are no grammatical errors and punctuation mistakes, but it goes without saying, that's the given. You know, you don't need to be a subject matter expert to be able to provide a good grammatical service, but we will provide that as well as a subject matter expertise. It helps to identify consistencies in the manuscript, of course, and as we said earlier on, identify potential gaps that may need to be filled. It can avoid ethical issues in the manuscript by checking on unintentional plagiarism. It can result in more succinct, clear, and readable content, making it a better fit for publication. Publishers, you know, want to be able to publish good research, and if the research is clear, it's unambiguous, and it's readable, it will stand more chance in peer review. It may still fail for the reasons we gave earlier on, but it won't fail because of language. It gives an opportunity to review the manuscript and add anything that is missing. As I said before, it could be inconsistencies, it could be gaps within the content itself. Okay, let's look at the difference between editing and proofreading. As we mentioned before, we will offer 3 levels of service depending on what the paper needs. Proofreading really focuses just on the spelling and on the punctuation and on the things like consistency of capitalization, but it doesn't look at the flow of the paper. It doesn't look at the style of the paper. It doesn't look at the word choice. Have you used the correct word choice? That's what you need to focus on. And that's why when we're often asked, why would I need a copy editing service rather than a proofreading service? A proofreading service tends not to be done by a subject matter expert, whereas a copy editing service will be done by somebody who is an expert in your area to help with style and consistency, the logical flow of the paper, the presentation of the paper, because they understand the discipline that you're operating in. Next slide, please. But, you know, as we said before, and as we said as we asked in the poll, you know, it is important that you read and proofread your own material. And these are a number of things that you can do to help yourself within that process. And this could be, if there's one takeaway slide from this that allows you to help yourself, please refer to this. Watch out for words that share the same pronunciation or spelling but mean entirely different things. If you can't justify a point or a statement or a sentence, eliminate it. If it can't be supported, don't use it. Don't overlook headings such as bibliographies, tables, page numbers, or footnotes. Make sure they're all in place. Reading from a hard copy document might also help. I think that depends on the individual, but I know in my case, I prefer to physically sit down and read the hard copy rather than an electronic version of the document. It just allows me somehow to annotate more easily. Reading work aloud often helps you to catch some errors, and I can't tell you a number of times I've had to do that myself and found errors in my own writing. So read it out loud. Put your writing aside for a while and refresh. Come back to it with a fresh mind. That can often help you to spot errors. There's an expression in English which is, you know, that person can't see the wood for the trees. which means that there are so many, they've been blinded by so many different things that they can't get to the real point. Using an AI-based grammar tool like Trinker AI, our tool, or others, will help you. It will certainly help you to eliminate those grammatical errors, as well as in the more advanced academic tools like Trinker, some of the academic syntax that you might use. Make a list of your common errors and check for those. So if you know you're making those same mistakes all the time, keep a note and refer back to it. And break down your proofreading to spot one kind of error at a time. Very logical. Keep it simple. Don't try to do too much at once. And also check the numbers and calculations that A, they're accurate, and B, that they're consistent. And that's something where mistakes can often be made. Okay, next slide, please. So there is a role in proofreading. Ultimately, you need to decide yourself what's going to help your submission the most. So here's a final checklist that you can use to edit and to proofread your content. Make sure that you've defined the abbreviations and symbols properly and you've used them consistently. Be consistent in your use. Make sure that you've verified all the facts, figures, and references, and they're properly cited. Ensure that you've been concise, that you've been clear, that you've been coherent, and that there is a proper logical flow that will help you to communicate that you've corrected all of your grammatical and typographical errors, that you're not leaving those mistakes for the publisher or the desk reviewer to address. Avoid any ambiguity, any misleading sentences, and remove words that are redundant, that you don't need to use, or phrases that are difficult to understand. Next. And also bear in mind your target audience. Write the content bearing in mind who your target audience is. What you might do for a presentation at a conference might be slightly different from what you would do for a research paper or for a preprint, for example. And as we said at the beginning, make sure when you're submitting a paper that you understand what it is the journal requires of you. Some journals can be very relaxed in terms of what you do. Others, particularly some of the big society journals, can be quite prescriptive. Okay, so here's an opportunity for you to ask questions, and I would encourage you to do so in the chat box. So first of all, some tips. How can I understand what writing style my journal of interest follows? It's not much about the writing style. It's about the rules that the journal specifies, and those rules are defined within the style guide. Every journal will have a style guide. Some will be very simple, some will be elaborate, but you always ask the publisher that you're submitting to, or always check the journal publisher's website, look at their instructions for authors. Most journals will have author guidelines and notes for authors that will help support you in terms of writing your paper. Refer to those notes. But you'll see that guidelines will vary hugely from journal to journal. So if you're submitting a paper to Journal A, and then that paper is rejected and you want to send it to Journal B, the process has to start again. You need to understand what you need to do to change your submission, if anything, in order for the submission to be appropriate. So the writing style can be also things like, does the journal, as we said earlier on, does it require British English or American English? Find out. Increasingly international journals, as we mentioned earlier, are less concerned about that, but you still see that, particularly again with maybe the American Society journals or the British Society journals, where they specify one type of English should be used. Are there any further questions?
Well, Tony, while we're at it, I might like, if in case you wish to add something to the question that I have answered or in written, Mr. Andy would like to know that I think this is very important for us, how Enago can ensure that our manuscript is not rejected by the journal we are submitting. My question is, what is the difference between AI Inago, and other AI tools such as ChatGPT and Grammarly. So while I have addressed this question, I would like your 2 cents to be added to what I have said, or if in case you differ, please feel free to share.
Yeah. You know, there are lots of tools in the marketplace. We've seen them all. There's Grammarly, there's Rightful, there's all sorts of tools. The one thing that makes our tools unique, or at least what makes it different, is that our tool was trained exclusively using academic content. So, you know, over the years, we've edited something like 2 million academic papers since we started. And what we use to train our AIs are the lessons, the mistakes that we found, not the content itself. The content itself is not.
Well, Tony, here the question is mainly to what difference between Inago and the AI tools. Inago being the human editing here.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Oh, there's no question that you're always going to get a higher and a more accurate level of editing from a human editor. And we've done plenty of tests with this. There are independent tests that show this. You know, you will never get the same level of subject expertise, unique, really micro subject expertise with an AI tool. You'll get good language, you'll get good grammar, but if there are specific issues around your subject area, your expertise, you still absolutely cannot get the same level of expertise from an AI tool as you can from a human editor, from a human expert. It's really about, you know, is 90% good enough? If 90% isn't good enough, then you've got to use a human editor. And I would always go, if you're in doing academic writing, particularly in areas like biosciences, life sciences, you've got to be 100%. And I think the only way you can assure that the language and the flow is correct is by using a human editor, because they have the expertise, they understand your subject background, and they can share their understanding of the discipline in a more personal way.
Right. Well, I keep on attending certain podcasts, certain webinars which are associated with AI, and expectation from AI to be 100% accurate is something which is unrealistic. So be dependent when you are looking for international publication where you're competing with Western authors. So I believe over there, Inago, which is the human insights that we can bring on the paper, will be of greater value add.
You know, and the key thing we say, and Neha made this point earlier on, is that, you know, we won't guarantee that your paper is accepted, because, you know, there may still be issues around the science, the methodology. You may not match the scope. The paper may not match the scope of the journal, but we do ensure that your paper will never be rejected because of the way it's written. And we can do that because we've put that paper in front of a subject expert who's probably a reviewer or an editor of that journal, or has been an editor of that journal in the past, or has been submitting papers to that journal in the past, who understands what the reviewers need. So they understand the kind of language that you need to use. You might still get rejected for those other reasons, but you will not get rejected because of language. You know, and if you get rejected from language journal 1 and you've taken that unlimited editing service, then you keep sending out papers back to us for a year, and we'll keep re-editing it and preparing it for the next journal, until you find a home for your paper. Do we have any further questions?
So,
Okay.
okay then.
Well, in that case,
so much, Tony. Go ahead.
You're very welcome. I was just going to say thank you. I hope you found that particular session useful, at which point I will hand over to my colleague Neha to close off this session.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for attending this particular session. Special thanks to the Prof. Harry and Dr. Ayu for helping us organize this particular session and making this gathering possible. Terima kasih, everyone. Have a blessed day ahead. Bye. Thank you,
Thank you very much, Tony and Arya. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.